Hello, my loves, and welcome back to Being That Woman. On today's show, I am ridiculously excited to be bringing this woman to your ears. And she's just an incredible woman that I've learned so much from in my journey in this space of being in women's liberation. I'm super, super excited to be talking to the one, the only Kari Azuma. Welcome to Being That Woman.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I have literally been so excited for this conversation, and I would just love for you to introduce yourself and just share more about who is Kari Azuma and what are you passionate about in this world.
Sure, yeah. I always answer this so differently. So, what is it going to be today? I do work with women in leadership, but mostly through the deep root nervous system conversation. So, really helping women uncover what is inner safety. How do I feel safe enough in my body, in my choices, in my decisions, in my own confidence and self-trust to actually move forward in the risks and the decisions that I want to make for my life, and we all lead in different ways. Leadership can be a really triggering word for people. It does not mean you have to be out in front or, that you have to be leading a corporation or whatever we think leadership could be. It's just literally, how do I face life every single day? What and what roles am I playing and how am I playing those roles out, and is it to the highest potential that I want to live in those roles in this lifetime, or am I just getting held back by overwhelm and fear or patterns that just keep repeating no matter how much work I do on them, that place is really juicy. And so it's always hard to explain exactly what I do, but really it's like building a competency to really be with what life throws at you in a really powerful way, and just having the body to live in a content space with how you're actually living. And I've combined a few different modalities from the 14 years I've been in this business of growth and development. Yeah, I started really with a wilderness rites of passage fast which I'm now leading, but that actually really kicked off my whole journey. And then I found embodied leadership, where I studied with my mentor Scott Cody and worked in embodied leadership for years, and then met up with another mentor, Alicia Tischel, who really kind of trained me in this beautiful way of looking at the nervous system, which is quite different than what I've seen is out there recently, as far as how transformative it is and how sustaining it is. So I sort of mixed the leadership and nervous system soup and just have been having incredible results with women. Really a lot of women who've done a lot of work and keep kind of going back to growth and development work over and over because they just don't feel fixed or whatever that feeling is. But then discovering that they actually can stand on their own 2 feet after doing this work, because they're contending with what I think is the most integral piece of, being fearless, which is your nervous system.
I'm curious about the nervous system piece. Could you explain a little bit more about what the nervous system is for any woman that might be listening and unsure about it for the first time?
Yeah, so our nervous system is basically a threat system that's built into our body, right? We're not born knowing how to stay safe. It's all subjective interpretation. And those cues start when you're in utero, literally when you're in your mom's womb. You're already looking at sounds and cues and feelings and sensations in your body around interpreting your environment. So from the ages 0 to 7, we're really looking around our world and seeing what is safe, what is not safe. And from all the work you've done, that you can experience a ton of trauma, in the beginning of life. And it doesn't have to be big trauma or scary trauma or intense trauma. It could just be little tiny things that over time can tell you this is what's unsafe and this is how you're going to cope with it. And then we kind of take those coping strategies into the rest of our life. And then the nervous system is oh, remember, this isn't safe, or remember, this isn't okay. And it kind of signals our kind of reptilian brain of, you're not okay in this moment, so react or do something. So I'm trying to make it really simple. Our nervous system is really a threat system that knocks on our door that says, hey, remember that thing we learned or that we interpreted back then? It's something's not okay right now. And it's not always trauma. Sometimes it's real things like, hey, you're about to get hit by a bus, step back. Your body feels that. It's like, oh yeah, I don't want to step into a busy street and get hit by a car, So we actually really need this threat system to survive. That's why the nervous system is so wonderful. Of course, we don't want to not have one. We want to have these stress signals come to us. But what so many of us don't know how to do or have the competency to do is to know how to close those stress signals. We kind of just ride them, or we react on them, or we'll like contort based on them, versus being able to actually face the signal, understand that the signal is there, instead of, which can be very subconscious sometimes. It's like, I don't always know that I'm getting alerted by my nervous system. Sometimes I'm just like, oh my God, that guy's going to break up with me and I'm so scared. But that's actually your nervous system going, we're going to lose love, we're going to lose belonging. And so a lot of the work I'm supporting women with is not letting the nervous system run the show, like actually being able to get out of our default responses that have patterned for years and years and years, and to start recognizing how to speak to your nervous system so you can say, hey, yeah, I know that one. Like in this moment, here's what we're going to do about that, just to kind of say it in a little tongue-in-cheek kind of way.
I absolutely love just that whole explanation, because it really does highlight the importance and just how, imperative it is that each woman gets to have a relationship with her nervous system, because we have a pandemic of women that are burnt out, stressed out, under-resourced, and constantly looking outside of them for soothing or for the release or for the relaxation or for the security. And I'd love just a little bit of a story as to how you got into this work and how you found the nervous system or nervous system found you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, when I was working in embodied leadership, I like halfway through, I had my son, and I had a pretty difficult birth, postpartum depression, like really tough tunnel at that time. And after I had my son, I actually started working just with mothers in leadership. And I was noticing, I was running these programs, I was doing one-on-one coaching, and these women were like really doing great in their leadership. They were like really kind of hitting the goals that they said they wanted to hit, and they were feeling empowered and setting boundaries, whatever it was, right? But there was some piece that I started noticing, especially like when I was having my second child, as I was moving along in that work, of like, these women seem empowered, but they seem stressed. Like it feels like they're overriding themselves in some way to have what they're doing. And it doesn't feel like in alignment. And I couldn't figure it out. Something was really bothering me. And I even stepped away from my work for like a year. I think it was like actually a year and a half, almost two. And during that time, I stayed home with my kids, which was my biggest edge. And I realized while I was living with them, as not working, during the pandemic, I was like, oh my God, it's like the nervous system. It's the nervous system. And this was right when the nervous system started getting popular. So like there wasn't actually a lot of conversation about it happening yet on a bigger scale. But I remember I loved Kimberly Ann Johnson, who wrote The Fourth Trimester, and she was starting to talk about the nervous system. She's ever since been one of my favorite people in that realm. And I read her book called The Jaguar, and I was like, oh, wow, like this makes so much sense. But I knew it wasn't enough just to read the book. So I dug in. I was asking my peers, like, who knows a nervous system expert I can study with? And that's how I got connected with, through my friend Bree Jones, to Alicia Halpin, who's now Alicia Tischel. And she kind of showed me a different way to approach the nervous system. And one of the reasons, first of all, when I spoke to her and I heard her explanation of how to work with the nervous system, I was just like, well, whatever you cost, I will work with you. I'm just enamored by what you see. And it's how I see now too. Cause like I knew there was some truth in it, and now I get it. I get why I was so enamored with it. But when I remember in one of our first sessions, because I worked with her a whole year before I really like trained under her and did my own work on my nervous system, she said to me, like something along the lines of like, what if your birth wasn't like a trauma, because it was such a big, like hard place for me in my life that I was recovering from. She's like, what if it was just like your baseline of safety, meaning like how you knew safety, got so knocked out of whack, because for me, it was like how I stay safe is through control. And nothing takes you out of control more than birth. There's like nothing. Like your body is taken over. It becomes nature. There's nothing you can do but just be with it, follow it, like know you're gonna, like you can do it. There's so many aspects of that. But I think she was right. And it was like no one had ever explained to me before that, like, people talk about, oh, your birth trauma, or you need to do this, or you can do some of this kind of healing. When she said that, I was like, thank you. No one has ever explained to me that, and that's exactly what it feels like. Like I just got so far away from what I felt was safe that I started coping in these really funky ways and trying to control more. And then it actually took over my motherhood journey for like the first 6 years. It was like, it really took over. Those patterns just completely just like roared. And I had anxiety for so long and I didn't get it. And when she explained it to me, that made so much sense. And then I started working on my flight response, which was where I was with my kids. I had to really visit those parts of myself that were so terrified during that time I had my first child, where I was like just wanting to run away, totally terrified that someone was leaving a baby with me. Like I had to meet that woman over and over and over, and it took time. But once I was able to actually make that connection of like, oh, it was how I knew how to stay safe. That's what got obliterated when I had that child. It just gave so much context to it instead of like, oh, I'm a victim of this trauma, because like we all have traumas, but the important thing to understand from this conversation we're having is that they affect how you feel safe. And so like the technology to go back in to retrain that, to say like, oh, actually, here's another way to stay safe. It changes your entire life, which is why I have like the results I do with my clients, which are the best I've ever gotten in my entire career because of this work. Because for me, it's like the last word. The nervous system is the last word of how we fall back into those patterns. And it's incredibly life-changing.
Oh my God, this is so powerful and quite the initiation into nervous system work. You shared something really specific that I want to pull at. And it's like you said that you really loved Alicia's approach and your approach to nervous system work. And I'm wondering, what approach is that?
I have a little bit of a different soup than Alicia. I'm not going to say I'm exactly the same because I'm bringing in the embodied leadership work, which for me just completely like accents it. And, I think Alicia's also a leadership coach. She calls her leadership neurowise leadership. And we both work on it in different ways. So like, it's beautiful. We'll have our own soup around it. But the deep root nervous system work is about going back into, it's not about getting regulated. And I think that's what's hard for me these days is like the nervous system has become so ubiquitous and so common that now it's just like, I see these memes and posts and things are like, well, it's because you have a dysregulated nervous system and you're dysregulated, which to me has put a lot of pressure on women. And I work with women, so I'm speaking about women. It's put a lot of pressure on women to like always be calm, always have it together, sort of this new rigidity that has come from something that's not supposed to be rigid. It's supposed to be really gentle and self-compassionate. And we think we need to be calm and centered all the time to be powerful women or powerful leaders, or we're failing. And that's become this subtext, which I'm not really aligned with. Where I love the deep root nervous system work is it's first of all, it's slow work. So it's like, I take the time to actually like reach into the women's nervous system with them so they can see, oh, this is where that pattern started. So a lot of the times the women I work with, they've gone through a lot of growth and development programs, but then they find themselves in the same pattern. They're like, why am I in the same pattern again? I got to get back into the work. But the reason they're having to get back into the work is because they're not getting to the root, in my opinion. And so you have to pull at the root. And my goal is like for my one-on-one clients to actually not need to come back to me, like for them to be like, oh, okay, now I know how to work this system, this nervous system. So when you go to the deep root, you're looking at the seeds you planted of how you understood safety. So if I'm talking to a woman about relationships, for example, on a call, then I will take her back into like, okay, well, what was your first impression of like what relationship is? And one of the most important questions I ask them most of the time when we're doing this work is, how did you cope? When you saw something that was unsafe, how did you cope? And so we're reaching into those coping patterns and pulling them out and seeing, okay, how can you deal differently with this fear versus the way that you have coped? So we have to work through that layer. And then we start reassigning new safety pathways in the brain. Like, oh, I have to remind myself that that's not how I stay safe anymore. And so it's a competency. That's what's different. It's a competency with knowing how to speak to those threats in your nervous system, which that's what I find a lot of people aren't teaching. It's specific in the specific way that I'm doing it and that I've seen it done. I'm not saying my way is the best. Okay, just to be clear, there's a lot of beautiful work out on the nervous system right now, and it can be activated in different ways. I'm of course biased, but I think I just believe in it so much because I've seen the women I've worked with really stand on their own 2 feet and say, I can face this now. I can face this relationship. I can face this really toxic family dynamic that I have, and I know I'm going to be okay. And I don't need it to be okay for myself to feel okay anymore. And so it takes the codependency out of the safety. So you're not looking outside of yourself for safety as much as, we're all going to do that naturally, but as much as you probably would have in the past. It's like, it's coming from inside of you. So I call it inside out leadership. It's like, I'm so safe inside, and I know that when I'm threatened, I know how to work with my nervous system. And that doesn't exclude feeling. It doesn't exclude feeling uncomfortable. It doesn't exclude being stressed. And it doesn't exclude being overwhelmed. It's just you have a different skill set to know how to work that through with your nervous system so that it doesn't get put on repeat.
Get what you mean about the regulated billboard of calm and easy and in flow and confident, and all of those things are basically gaslighting the real human experience. And I really love that, you show that both can be true at the same time, and that, a woman's experience has to, on some level, to, evolve and to grow and to create boundaries. It has to come with some discomfort, but it's, having a relationship with the discomfort. And you spoke specifically into relationships, and a lot of the women who are in my space and in my community, they are in this space where they're breaking up, or they've broken up with someone, they're going through a divorce, or they're having a real challenging experience or situationship with a guy. And I'm wondering about, what is the experience that tends to happen when a woman, goes through a divorce or goes through a breakup? What is the nervous system languaging of that experience?
Yeah, well, the first thing I'm going to say about that is it's going to be subjective. So safety is subjective. It's amazing, kind of like how, none of us are, let's like no one star is the same in the sky, right? So it's like we're the same. We have a completely different operating system from the person next to us. We might even feel like survive very similarly or cope very similarly to someone, but the cues in your body of how you stay safe will have their own constellation. They'll have their own operating system. So of course, when it comes to a breakup, like you could be someone who, the different attachment styles, right? Anxious attachment avoidance, or, those things come from the nervous system. And it's how we learned, like anxious attachment, it's how we learned to cope, right? Like we usually attach, like if a dad is avoidant, let's say, and a mom is anxious, it could, like, one child could attach to one safety cue, and another child, like the sibling, can attach to the other. And so it's not like it's one set rule of like a household. It's like, oh, I saw my mom be safe by like controlling everything and making sure everything's okay. And so that feels really safe for me. And that's what I'm observing that I want to do. Whereas like the sibling could say, oh, dad just didn't deal with that and he walked away and that's how he protected himself. And so I'm going to attach to that. It's really wild. Like, so I'm saying that just because it's so individual. So I can't always speak to it on a blanket level, but what I can say generally is that whatever baseline of safety you have in your body, of how you've learned how to be okay, how you've learned how to interpret relationship, those cues are going to be alive and well when you're in relationship. They're going to be alive and well when you're in patterns of like who you pick. Like it's really interesting. And a lot of it is just your interpretation of like what you need to stay safe. So it's beautiful to do when you're going through a divorce or a breakup that's really hard. It is actually beautiful to do this work on yourself, because by understanding and interpreting what are the ways in which I coped with relationship, or even my dad, or then, and I know this sounds kind of like basic coaching or therapy, but if you actually look at this, at the patterns overarching in your life around that, you can start tracking what we call a baseline. And a baseline is just exactly how it sounds. It's sort of like the ground zero, the homeostasis of how your safety system works. So if you're like a computer, it's your operating system, it's like that's how you're computed or how you're programmed. And so it's like you're going into the program and you got to kind of like look at the wires and see like which wires are crossed, and what's, is this alarm like bell that was set in my operating system still valid? And God, there's just so many places I could go here. It's like you can build your relationship on a fight response. You can build your relationship on a flight response. You can build your relationship through deep fawning and overgiving and being so anxious that like you're just willing to acquiesce everything. And when you build the codependency, when you're building a relationship upon a way to stay safe versus coming from your center and from your values and from like what feels true, because you have enough inner confidence, enough inner safety to approach a relationship like that, it's going to hurt a lot when that relationship goes away, because you need it to stay safe. Like there's a whole nother layer when we're talking about safety and breakup of like, well, what's the level of codependency you had on that person? What was the level of how they made you feel like you could be in the world and you would be okay? And how much were you dependent on that? And that's not to say that we shouldn't have feelings around like that person made me feel really safe and now I'm sad it's gone. You know, I actually believe that when we break up, we have to go through the full spectrum of grief. And when you go through the full spectrum of grief, you can hear your nervous system better about what it's saying it's scared of. And so that's something I would really recommend to women when they're, because a lot of women just want to like dust off and go on and not be affected, or they feel like, oh, I'm letting this have too much power over me. But I think if you separate grief from like the like need, the clawing, the grasping of like I need this back, I need the relationship, to feel okay, and you actually are able to properly grieve, which grieving is like a really important part of nervous system work, because we feel really unsafe when things that we were used to get taken away from us. That's a huge alarm bell in our system. But having the capacity, the ability to stay with the discomfort and access your inner safety, that's huge. If you have that competency when you go through a breakup. So I've seen women who've had sort of like this kind of, this kind of competency and skill set go through a breakup, versus I've seen people who go through it without, and it's a very different path, because there is a place in which a woman who has the ability to speak to her nervous system can sit with the discomfort longer, can allow herself to feel, can allow for really, really bad days and not make it her collapse, who can recognize what collapse is, who can recognize when she's in a fight response and trying to like deny what's real and not in acceptance. Like your nervous system will play with you and say, like that threat system will play with you and say like, we have to survive it this way because this is how we know how to survive it. And if you just default into that and it's not a great way to survive it, then you'll just experience like really tough breakups and really have a hard time through your divorce. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I am loving all of this so much, because grief is so untouched by women. And there is a fear of grief. I often hear from women, if I go there, then I won't get out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, also what comes up is I don't have time for it. I need to be productive. I've got a job, I've got kids, etc., etc. So she doesn't actually create the space for herself for grief. But actually, when I work with women, there's no space even before that anyway, because she's created a life around being useful, and, being a high achiever and doing all the things and being everything to everyone and having this, the multitasker. And she's so good at it as well.
And those,
So,
by the way, are all safety cues, and those are all coping strategies. So
yeah.
they are entrenched in her nervous system. That's how. So when you're looking at your nervous system, it's like you're always looking at how am I surviving this, right? Like when you're looking at when you're dysregulated, it's like you're actually in a question of like I need to survive this somehow, but it's not really lining up with your truth and your center. It's actually just like, no, this is where we go to survive. So I'm just going to go there. I'm going to be the overhelper, the overachiever. I'm going to throw myself into work, whatever that may be. And that takes some time to dismantle, and I stress the word time because I think there's a lot of people who want to like have that quick fix, but this work is really slow and intentional. But because the nervous system can't actually move and heal at a fast pace, it has to heal things slowly, one by one, and it has to have choice. So it's interesting. Like it takes a lot of
Just
patience.
in loads of rolling eyes, like,
Exactly. I'm like, that's the thing women don't really want to make time for. It's like, well, and I used to be that woman, so I totally get it. Like
yeah,
I
it's like
absolutely
another
do.
thing that women just want to tick off. Regulated nervous system. Now I'm calm, now I'm at ease. And there's something I want to pull on is like you were sharing out about being in the fight energy in a relationship or the flight energy or the appease in a relationship. And of course, today before our call, I was off having lunch somewhere. And on my walk back, I was walking behind a couple with two kids. And there was this woman that was literally yelling at her husband in front of her children. And I was just like, oh, my heart was breaking. And he was just taking it and taking it. And, part of me judged her and was like, well, how can you speak like that to your husband in front of the children? That's where I went. And then I took a step back and I was like, what happened in the lead up to that had that woman experiencing that response that she couldn't choose another way,
Yeah.
that was her autonomic response, and that I could clearly see that she had no control over this. And I'm wondering if you can speak into a little bit about how these patterns or these responses more so can actually feel like we can't control them when we get to like the fight response or the flight response, and how it can, take a really long time to regulate and go through that to then be in, a more of a clearer, open mind, and actually then communicate from that space as well.
Yeah. Beautiful question. I think, first of all, just thinking about this woman, it's like, the first question that comes to my mind is like, just what is she scared of? Just in a really compassionate way of, yeah, because it's hard for me to watch women yell at their men too. Like, I took a course a long time ago with Allison Armstrong, who I love, if you know her. And, we took an oath to never emasculate men, which is such an edgy thing to do. But I took it so seriously, and like the way that she taught it really made me take it very seriously. And it really was life changing to see like, oh, like I don't actually have to emasculate a man to keep my safety, But a lot of women don't know that. A lot of women, it's like, she could have come from a place in her life where she just was like, watching her dad take control over her mother and right all the time, and she was like, I'm never going to be that, which is, by the way, called repressive fawning. Repressive fawning is being like having a guard up against like I'm never going to be that way, but then it doesn't allow you to actually be your true self. It makes you guarded, and so you're still acquiescing your heart in some way. And so it's like this backwards fawning of just like I'm going to have a false power and be in control and like make sure that like I'm in charge, and it really breaks connection, and it doesn't foster belonging. It fosters authoritarianism, right? Like, or being an authoritarian relationship. But she's scared. And I think it's crazy. Like when you do this work over time, you just start seeing that. You just start seeing like everyone's as a nervous system versus like a fallible person. Um, and so I think like, the same question arises of like, I wonder what her baseline is. I wonder if control is her baseline, or having to be in charge, or how did she cope throughout her life, and where is that defaulting in this moment with her husband? And then you're watching her kids, and her kids are now absorbing those safety cues, and they're going to be influenced in their own safety around how they're watching that dynamic play out. So it's just fascinating. But I would say, yeah, there's probably something that played out in her history, which is why I just wish all women could do this work, because she doesn't have to be in that fight, but she doesn't know that. Her body doesn't know that. Her body, and this is why somatics are such an important part. Somatics, like the study of the body and actually bringing the body in. You cannot do nervous system work from just a head space. It's a body experience. We are a nervous system. So we can't actually keep our body out of the running when we're retraining these patterns. It's like we have to, most of the time in my sessions, like a lot of women are just like eyes closed in their body, talking from the subconscious, from this, what we call the subtle body, which is the subconscious, right? Because your body is pattern following, right? Your brain's pattern making, but your body's going to follow a pattern. So that woman might have just been like, don't do it. Don't yell at him in front of the kids. But she's so scared that like she reached the edge of her capacity. Capacity, like the window of tolerance. You might have heard these terms if you're listening, but capacity is just like the window to which you are able to stay centered and calm, and then you reach that edge and then you can no longer do it. Like you lose your ability to stay calm. And so she might have been like really upset with herself in that moment, but just been at the edge of her capacity and been like, okay, now I'm gonna yell at my husband because this is what I know works. Like it works to make me feel safe. The fact that he was taking it tells me that that he was probably like, okay, well, and then he's coping, right? Like he's coping based on whatever he learned of like, this is how I have to be with my woman. Like he wasn't standing for his dignity. He wasn't pausing her. He wasn't saying, hey, are you okay? Right? He was just taking it, and they were in this dynamic. And what I would call that dynamic as a couple is survival. They were surviving.
Yes.
Right?
And it's so common, right? We see this type of relationship in so many, I would say Western cultures predominantly because of the societal and social pressure and just how the family dynamics have been raised. Is there anything particular that because I see you as an absolute nervous system genius, right, in this work. And I'm just curious, do you see any difference between the female nervous system and the male nervous system? And I know that you obviously work predominantly with women, but is there anything where there is a clear difference in how the responses actually play out?
Yes. Yes is the answer. There's so many similarities, and I really believe the same, like, quote unquote formula applies. Like we all have a an operating system. We all have safety cues that cue us into if we're safe or not. We all have a way in which we survive and cope with that. Like that stuff's all the same, pretty across the board. However, women have more estrogen than men, right? And so the estrogenated woman is going to experience probably a higher fawn response. And I learned this from Kimberly Ann Johnson. And Kimberly, I hope I'm making you proud in the way I explain this. but it was just so brilliant. The first time I ever heard it, I was like, this makes so much sense. The fawn response, which is basically like when we feel like prey and there's a predator in the room, right? Like whether that predator is like public speaking or your father-in-law talking about politics or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be an actual tiger, but there's like a metaphorical tiger in the room, right? And you feel a little bit like, oh God, your body might clench and tighten up and you feel uncomfortable, or you're just like, oh God, this person's going to ask me for a favor and I don't know how to say no. Like that feeling, that's a feeling of like prey. I'm being targeted, like my power feels threatened. I'm going to take my power offline in this moment and just do what I need to do to survive this. And that reaction in the nervous system came a lot later in our evolution, the fawn response. And because the social nervous system came online last, right? We had fight, flight, or freeze. Like we had like freeze, the parasympathetic system was first like caveman, dragging ourselves along, right? And then we had the fight or flight like come online so we can hunt and survive and do, coordinate action and those kinds of things. But then the social nervous system, as societies evolved, came on last. And that's all about belonging and do I have tribe and all of those things. And so that developed particularly from estrogen. And so we as women, like we are more apt to fawn because we're estrogenated beings than men are. Isn't that wild?
So
And so that's why, like, with the whole, I know so controversial, but with like the Me Too movement, when you're hearing a lot about women who are like, it was like they were doing things that like were out of integrity for them, but like because they were scared, but yet they weren't like raped, but they were next to like such big power that they kind of acquiesced to the man in the room. It's because like when you're in a fawn response and when you feel like prey, what you'll do is you'll line yourself up with the power in the room versus use your own power. And so it's like that's why women like in particular feel like that really big energy of like, oh God, like, ugh. I'm sure you've all had that feeling where you're in a room and you just feel like dominated and afraid and kind of like, okay, I'm just going to go with the status quo to be okay here. And it happens more with women. I'm not saying this across the board as a generality, but like it does happen more that women feel unsafe in that way. And if you ever, again, going back to Alison Armstrong's work, one of the things she says is like men need acknowledgement, women need safety, and women predominantly feel more unsafe in the world. And my husband recognizes this, like, wow, when you're walking in a dark parking garage, the difference you feel versus what I feel, right? Like we feel more like prey in more situations than men, and so our nervous system is reacting at a higher level on that basis. It's crazy, right?
that is so insane. I love it. I love the history of it all, and in particular, like women used to sit in circle, right? And they would gather. And I think there's been a massive gap in that for a very long time of women, finding safety with each other first before with the masculine. And I know just from my own spaces with women that, women have been pitted up against each other for centuries, right? And we've been very well conditioned to like, be in fear of each other and be in competition with each other and compare ourselves to other women. And it's so, so huge. So it's just so wild to me.
Which
Oh,
is
yeah.
fascinating. It's so edgy. Women hate this, but I have to say it because it's such a food for thought. Alison Armstrong used to say, women don't have honor. And like when you first hear that, you're like, what the hell? Like, we have honor. But the way she said it is like, it's not because we're bad people or we don't have integrity. It's because when, like in a primal sense, when men would go out to hunt, women were in charge of the village, right? And so like for the most part, we would gather, we'd be together, and we would take care of each other. But if something came into the village and it was like there was a usurper, a woman would just slice that woman's head, be like, nope, like I'm protecting the children, I'm protecting the village, right? So it's like we had to have a different competency, whereas men were going out to hunt and they had to have each other's backs and they were wingmanning each other basically to get the kill, right? They had to trust each other, so they had to build honor for what they were playing out. But women actually had to have a different competency around like, yes, I can be friends with you, but if it's going to affect my children or my reputation or like, it's like, that's danger, right? And so they act on that danger. And I mean, I'm really simplifying this. I'm sure Allison would explain this so much better, but it really threw me off for a long time. But based on what you're saying, I really do think that this is an area of evolution for women because we don't have to guard the village in the same way anymore. So it is actually something that we have a responsibility to evolve the relationship between women and women.
Yeah.
And this happens in the corporate world, right? Women don't have each other's backs in the boardrooms, right? It's like they're cutthroat with each other instead of having each other's backs, whereas like the men's club, they stay together. It's so
Oh,
wild.
it's
So
so
like this
interesting.
concept always is like in my mind, just
Yeah.
playing around safety. Like this is
Yeah.
so fascinating.
And what just hearing that, what comes through for me is back then there was no fawning response when they were in the village protecting their village, and it was very much that women had access more to that fight energy and the flight energy. I imagine more so than women today, where we have many women that are passive aggressive and that don't feel comfortable with accessing that anger and in a way in which obviously is healthy. And we see a lot of frustration and irritability, and it's very subtle, but it kind of sits there. And yeah, I just see that a lot in so many women. I think what would be really cool to talk about now, because you mentioned it earlier, is your rites of passage experience. Now that we're talking about going back to,
Hmm.
our primal and our basic, human way of being and experiencing. And I'd love to hear more about this incredible experience that you offer women in the world.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to talk about this because this is also like the third evolution. I feel like of how my work has evolved. Like starting with embodied leadership, bringing in the deep root nervous system work and inner safety work, and which I do really like to talk about. This work is inner safety work versus nervous system because it just gets convoluted a little bit, but it's all of it. You're working with the nervous system, so it's there. But when it came to when it came to the initiation fasts, like this was interesting how this came back around for me because I used to guide these fasts. I fasted. So basically, what this wilderness rites of passage is like, um, I went. My dad did this when I was 16, which is how I really found out about this whole process, and it really helped. It actually was a big part of how I fell in love with Native American culture and kind of started following that path, which is a big path my husband and I follow now, um, and it was just I was so enamored with this process because it's based loosely on the Vision Quest. There's a lot of different wilderness rites of passage that have been alive in every culture since the dawn of time. Like every culture has really used wilderness as a way of initiating people. And having that boy to man, woman to girl to woman experience. But what this is, it really is an initiation process of really dying to the child and the adolescent and becoming a true adult. And it's not a vision. Like I'm very careful to not call it a Vision Quest because Vision Quest is its own ceremony. It has its own practice, its own origins, and that's and like in Lakota culture, which I follow, a lot of those beautiful traditions in just my own practices. It's called the amblecha, and that's a very different process than we're just taking people out into the wilderness and having them face themselves, really. But there is influence from those ways, so I don't want to diminish that either. But it's such an incredible experience because I did this when I was 27 and I fasted alone in the wilderness for 3 days and 3 nights with no food, by myself in the mountains. There was someone base camping us, so it's not like you're totally alone, but you're out there. You're not with them, you're alone. And to this day, it is probably the most like embodied self-trust I have ever experienced, and also the deepest dialogue with nature I've ever experienced. And both together are explosively powerful. And there was a time, like, I think it was like a year and a half ago, I was leading a program I had called the Nervous System Reset. And one of the women in there, Lena, who I love, she was like, I was talking about this experience in a teaching. And she was like, Kari, if you ever did that again, I would go out there with you and you would be the person I'd trust to do it with. And I was like, whoa, like that's pretty cool. And it was funny she said that because I was already thinking when I was working with one of my clients, she needs a Vision Quest. Like or not a Vision Quest, a Vision Pass. Sorry, I just said it's not called a Vision Quest. Now I'm going back on it. No, she needs a rite of passage. She needs this experience. Like I feel like I've done everything I can, at this level to model what inner safety is, and there's nothing like being out there in the wilderness alone, in this way that teaches you a deep inner trust. And so that had just been a flighting thought. And then this student said this to me, and I'm like, okay, I feel like maybe this is coming back into my life. There was a lot of other signs, a lot of the things that happened too, some ceremonies I sat and stuff like that. But I was just it was creeping in. And then finally, there was a point where some things happened, and I was like, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do it. And Lena, that woman, ended up going out with me, which was cool. It took a couple times. I was like, you ready to go out? I'm going to do it. She's like, no, that's all right. I was like, oh, come on. You're the one who convinced me to do this. Or not convinced me, but you influenced us so much. But she had her reasons. And then, I totally let it go. And then she came back. She's like, I actually do want to do it. So it was great. It was a beautiful story. But yeah, so I took them out. We do preparation for 6 months, just through calls and storytelling and supporting and teaching them things that will support them mentally and physically while they're out there. And it really does, what I love about this process, there's no way around it. It rewilds you. Like there's no way you can leave without being rewilded. Like there was women out there, tracking like animals and like, bathing themselves naked with water, just like really getting into the process. And you don't have to do any of that. Just a heads up if you go out. But it's like they didn't choose that, or they didn't think they were going to do any of that. It was like they were listening so deeply to themselves, and there was no other access point. That's the thing that's so powerful about it when it comes to the nervous system, is there's literally nothing outside of you but nature, and nature is a reflection of everything that we are. And it's one that we don't access enough, and is the best thing in the world for your nervous system, right? Like being in nature is the best thing. And it's the number one medicine, I would say. And so it was just really incredible to watch. I mean, it was an initiation for me, just guiding. It was wild. I hadn't done it in 9 years, and I had apprenticed for 2 years. I had never lead guided, and I just stepped right into lead guide. Learned some lessons around that. I'm actually doing my own fast next year for myself to reinitiate myself as a guide. But what initiation really is it's a rite of passage is 3 stages. It's severance, which is dying to the old self. It's threshold, so going out on that heroine journey of like being out in the wilderness, facing yourself, really contending with those parts of you. And then incorporation, which is actually one of the hardest parts, because you have to bring that vision, that self back into the world. And we offer some support around that on the other end too. It's really important, I think, that you do. And yeah, it's just a really beautiful communion with nature. It's so powerful. And I saw it in every single woman that came back, that they were changed. And so, yeah, it was like, it's hard work to guide this, like I didn't do it for years. So I'm like, it's so hard. And my husband, by the way, he's been doing this for years and years and years. He leads Compass, which is an initiation program for men in the wilderness. So I've been watching him do it for years, and I've done it, and I've known about it. And he's like, I wish you would guide this for women. All the husbands are asking about their wives. They want to go out. And I'm like, I'm not ready. So it's not simple. It took a lot of work, but it's like, it's so important to me at this point, based on what I've seen with inner safety and like how important it is that these women have an opportunity to really become that adult. It's like, it really is amazing how you just really come into your wisdom and your self-knowing in a way that I could never do as a coach. It's a totally different process. So yeah, it was powerful.
Wow. I mean, it sounds absolutely terrifying, and also extremely necessary and needed to a certain degree for so many women. I guess something that I am curious about with it though is it for every woman, or who is it specifically for? Is there a type of woman out there in the world that hands down, like this is something that you absolutely need?
I feel a little differently, like when I think about the nervous system work, I'm like, everyone needs this. In fact, like I just finished foundational videos because I was like, I needed to have something that women can have, that everyone can access this, because it's a birthright. It's a birthright to know this information, and that are affordable, and you could just get, it's like, I need to make it accessible. That was kind of like this whole last year, is like, how do I make this more accessible? And I feel like every single woman could highly benefit from this work. With the Vision Fast, I feel like every woman could, but you have to be called. So if you're not called, then it's probably not something you should do. It's like, I know sometimes it's like, especially when you're in the growth world, it's like, oh, I want to challenge myself to do that thing, But man, like, you really got to know what you're signing up for. And I really vet women, before we have a nice long conversation. And I'm just like, why do you really want to do this? What is it? And I will tell you, like another shout out to Lena. She was from London, never camped, never been in the wilderness like that, city girl. I mean, she was I was so impressed with this woman. A lot of the women I took out weren't campers. And so it was so interesting. So I don't think it's about like you have to be a mountain woman or like a nature woman. I actually think it's so beautiful for people who aren't exposed to that to like actually have this mind-blowing experience with it. I think it's more about timing. I think it's more about is this I mean, do I believe initiation is an important rite of passage that every woman should experience? Yes, I do. But we have them naturally as women. We have our menstruation, we have having babies, we have menopause. So we just don't ritualize that as a society. And so it's really hard for women to actually embrace their transitions as rites of passage. And it's my total intention to also bring attention to that as I guide these fasts. And then the fast is another way to do it really intentionally. It's like drawing a line in the sand and saying, I am going to acknowledge that I am letting go of a person that I've been and I'm stepping into a new person. And I'm willing to go out in the wilderness and fast for 3 days and 3 nights to find out who that is. And those are the women who come. They're ready. They're just like, I'm in. You know, most of them, none of them, I didn't have to convince any of them. You know, I don't want to do that. I don't want to convince people to go out in this thing. There's like, they got to know. But I will say I have a waiting list of women who want to go out. I felt so much guilt about like taking this year off because, you know, I think we're going to be maybe moving and to another place. And my husband's son dances in the summer. And so like, that's a big endeavor we always have. And then to do a fast on top of that, I was like, that feels like a lot this year, but also I need to initiate myself as a guide. I need to remember what it's like to be out there. And I think I'm going to do 4 days and 4 nights and maybe even change that for the other women, but we'll see. My mentor always said, women get it in 3. You don't have to do 4. They don't need that extra challenge that men need. So I'm sitting with that. But I feel like that was something that was really clear as I was leading these women this year. It was like, oh, I have to, any parts of me that like feel like there's self-doubt or they're, you know, like whatever it is, I have to let go of that so I can actually really be present for these women. And I felt some of those things follow me when I was guiding this time. I was like, yeah, I should have fasted first. But no mistakes. Like I throw myself into learning to figure out what is actually needed. And they had an amazing experience. I don't regret it at all. But that's what I learned. And now I have guilt because I'm like, oh God, these women are waiting and I want to take them out. But I'm like, I have to do this in integrity. I have to do it, you know, the right way. So it's like, all right, 2027, it's back, but I just need to lay the foundation, you know, so that I can do this, you know, maybe even more than once a year or have other guides do it more than once a year. Because I know women are really waiting for this. It's not really super common, you know?
No, it's definitely not your average online program on Zoom and Marco Polo. It's definitely not that.
And I will say, this is really important. I will say it's important to have a lineage.
Yeah.
It's important to come from a lineage to lead this. I come from a lineage that taught me this, a community, a school. Like you can't just go out and do this as a coach and like know what to do. There's specific technology, specific ways to mirror, to guide this because it's so different than coaching. So that's really important too, is like, it's a disaster if you just take people out and you don't have like mentors or elders guiding you and apprenticing you for a few years first. So I'm going to say that disclaimer because it's quite a journey to guide this and it's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I can see all the coaches like, oh, this is a great idea. And then it's like, oh, no, it's definitely that piece of like, you've got to have embodied the experience yourself and been in the work. And it's not a certification that you can just do, right? It's something that is in the bloodline. And I think it's an incredibly unique experience that, you know, any woman who, like you say, is feeling called, gets to gift it to herself. I am definitely on the waiting list. I'm not going to lie. The fact that you said it's 2027 just made me feel a little bit.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry,
it
Anna.
feels good. 2027 feels good. I can have a little bit more time to like ease myself into it. So obviously the rites of passage experience is quite a unique experience. And maybe for the woman that started listening to this and was hearing about the nervous system for the first time, and then we're talking about the rites of passage. What about for the woman that knows that the rites of passage is not for her or not for her right now? Where would you invite a woman to start who is in an experience, let's say she's in a breakup or she's going through a challenging relationship and things aren't feeling good, and she can see that she's constantly stressed, and she's been hearing about nervous system work, but she's not been fully integrating it. Where would you invite her to first start?
Well, just like in her own practice, or like where to get some support?
I think a both and would be gorgeous for some women, because some women, they read the books, they listen to the podcasts,
Hmm.
and they get all of the concept of it. They understand, okay, so I have a nervous system that is responding to the world, and it's somewhat also distorting what it is that I'm seeing or experiencing.
Yeah.
And maybe she's living in that really high level, that window of tolerance where she's constantly out on the edge and outside of herself. Maybe the woman who was, on the street today, in that fight response with her husband, and she's like realizing this isn't for me and I need to do something about it.
Mm.
So yeah, practices and resources, and some of your resources would be awesome.
So one of the things I'll just say is like a right away, like a tip, just something you can access today, is when you're feeling threat in your system. And the way you'll know you're feeling threat is like, probably it's going to be unique to your own body, but it's going to be some sort of contraction in your body. Like my stomach tightens, right? Like my stomach is like my speaker point. My stomach gets agitated when I'm sensitive, like all the things, right? Or sometimes it's people's neck or their shoulders, or they get headaches or whatever it is, or you just feel in your body, I'm just like, oh, that tightening up, and that like I'm feeling, it, like it might show up as like I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling pissed, I'm feeling out of control. But just kind of coming back to that contraction and just saying like, what am I really afraid of right now? What is the threat? What is the threat that I'm feeling? It's just such a beautiful question versus like, what's wrong with me? Why am I like, what can I do to fix this? Like, those are things that take you into deeper dysregulation, and that fix energy, especially. It's like, oh
Mm-hmm,
man.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's just like, what am I really afraid of? And I think we're so afraid to ask ourselves this question because it takes us slowing down. And slowing down can be really scary when you're in a fight response. In a fight response, you just want to conquer and you want to survive, and you want to, like, your ego's just going to come online and say, like, how are we going to survive this? So it's asking that question when you're feeling those survival tendencies of like, I'm going to conquer, I'm going to control, I'm going to get more organized, I'm going to get more calm, whatever it is, to say like, okay,
Not talking
pause.
about me at all.
No, I'm really not. So, but that's funny. When you're in those moments, just really ask yourself, like, okay, I see that I'm going in to survive whatever this is right now, and what is the actual threat? What am I actually afraid of? And then one of the most powerful acts for the nervous system is affirming. Is just saying, I feel really scared right now. This feels really scary. Or I just broke up with this person. And it's like really being honest about, I play this little exercise called What's True, just saying everything that feels true, even if it doesn't make sense or it's not logical or it's messy, or if it's actually true for you, but it's like, what's true for you? And it's just like, well, what's true is I miss this person, and I feel like an appendage got ripped off, and I don't know actually how to live without that appendage, and I'm really scared. And I want to be with him, and this sucks, and I hate the way I feel. Just saying what's actually true, that helps you line up. This is a little bit of a jargon, but it kind of helps you line up with that implicit self, the part inside of you that is freaking out, just for layman's terms. And it's going, oh my gosh, she hears me. She knows I'm scared. She's saying what I'm feeling. Because most of the time we will just try to cover it up and put like rose covered perfume on shit, and just be like, it doesn't smell, it's fine, but it does, it's stinky, and we have to say it out loud. This stinks and I hate it. And so affirming is actually a huge regulation practice, like a lot of the times more so than doing breath work or whatever, cold plunges or whatever. And those things are amazing modalities. You just don't want to use them as band-aids. You want to use them in conjunction with meeting threat. And then finally, it's like really just allowing, just saying like, this is where I'm at right now. This is it, and I'm allowing myself to be here, and I'm allowing myself, and you can even say out loud, I won't always be here. I'm not the only person going through this. Those things really help your body feel safer. Just saying.
Mm.
So just like really, really simply not overriding yourself, and starting to track the ways that you're surviving, or starting to track the things that you feel threat around, and just kind of looking at like, whoa, these are the things that make me feel threat. Sometimes you're very surprised by it, when you're actually digging in and looking at it. And it's nice, like when I'm working with clients, it's like I'm helping them track that, and then I'm reminding them, and then I'm bringing it back into pattern, and like it's helpful to be held. I loved being held in this work because I find it very difficult to like produce new ways of feeling safe on my own. It's nice for your nervous system to be held by someone who's really safe and really trustworthy, so that you can feel like, okay, I can lean back into this and just be like,
Mm-hmm.
I can soften into like the actual holding. And like sometimes my clients get triggered at first because I'm not fixing things for them.
Mm. Do it for
I'm
me. Yeah.
And they're like, what is this? Why is this isn't working? And then like I just got the best feedback from one of my last clients, and she was like, I don't feel like we did anything, but I feel like a completely different person. And I feel amazing. But like it's like I'm like, well, how are you defining doing something? Right? It's like because we're so used to the external result being the thing that makes us look or feel better. But it's like she's like, but inside I feel so solid. I'm like, well, that's what you came to me for. I'm not gonna like come here to help you like rebuild your business. I'm not a business coach, but it helps your business. Like she's posting more than she's ever posted, right? Like she's doing more stuff because she's out of freeze. So it's so interesting how it works. The other thing I would say is I did mention this earlier, and these are being released very soon. Maybe by the time this comes out, I'm not sure when it's coming out. But I did create these videos that are evergreen, and it's kind of, I call it like my book. It's like the book I would have written, but I did it through videos, and they're like in 15-minute increments, so the nervous system can absorb them better. They're not like long
Not
videos.
overwhelming.
No, and it's like at your own pace, but it's literally like, in my opinion, thousands of dollars of like value of information of like, and it's like, each video is like going to be like $247. It's like and there's two of them, and I'm going to bundle them and make them cheaper. I'm just going to make them like, here you go, take this, because I had that download last year. Is like every woman needs to know like what we're talking about on this podcast, and not just hear the podcast.
Yes.
And not have to pay thousands of dollars to do the work. They need to just have a way to listen to this so they can start going, oh. And the first one's called Fundamentals of Inner Safety, and the other one's called Discovering State. So I talk about safety, the baseline safety cues, what those actually are. And then I talk about in Discovering State, the different states: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, what to know about all those states in your body. And so I believe I created that because I feel like that's a great place to start. That will just give you everything you need to know about deep root nervous system work. And just, like join my newsletter if you want to stay posted on that when they're fully released. And I'm not trying to sell you. You asked like, what are the best ways? And I'm like, this, honestly, I made this for this reason, because I want women to have it. I want women to know more about the root of the nervous system, and because I want powerful female leaders out there.
Yes, absolutely.
They're not like overwhelmed and burning out and feeling totally terrified all the time. There's a lot going on in the world.
And I think two of the things that really come through for me in your share of like the get started, with the videos, or just like in that conversation with herself and meeting herself, is, number one, re-inhabiting your body and learning to like actually pay attention to the cues of your body, and then rebuilding a relationship with yourself,
Yes.
because we've been so conditioned as women to look outside of us. What does he need? What does she need? What do I need to do outside of me to feel good? And we've forgotten of actually, tending to ourselves. And I love this. And the videos sound absolutely awesome. I think, in a world where, the costs are rising and all the things, like women do need access to this information, and not just the information, but the practical side of actually what to do, because we're in an age now with AI and all the things where information is the information is out there. Women absolutely can find the information that they need, but it's the actual guidance of how to, and actually doing the practices, because it is a practice, right? So
What's
I will,
AI is it's always going to stay at the head level, right? Like even in
yes,
the
I
videos, I
love
have
that.
somatic practices that help women actually connect the body to what's taught. And if
Yes.
you don't do that, you're not going to actually access your nervous system. You have to involve the body.
Love, love, love. Well, I'll be sure to get the links from you and I'll add it to the show notes. And in the meantime, if this is released before your release, where can any woman that is, yes, 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 I need to absorb more of Kari Azuma and maybe even consider the rites of passage, where can she find you?
Yeah, I would say my main hub currently is Instagram. So at Kari Azuma, and it's Kari. Weird Kari spelling. Um, and yeah, I mean, I like I said, if you join my newsletter, you'll get all the updates on when things are coming out and released and all of that. So and just get free tips, like free coaching through the newsletter as well. Um, I think that's the best way. I do have a website, kariazuma.com. It's getting transferred to another software right now, so if it's down, that's why. But yeah, those are great places to find me, and I'm always like super. Don't be afraid to reach out to me, like talk to me about something that you took away from this or learned or you have a question about in my DMs. Like I'm really good at responding, so feel free, to just really get your questions answered. I love teaching about this work.
I have absolutely loved this conversation so much. I'll be sure to put all of those links as well in the notes. Thank you so much. I'm just forever like in love with the way you teach this work, and it just it really inspires me, and I love how much you love it, and I love how much you want other women to get it and to love it as well. So thank you so much for being here, and just from me and all the women in the world and all the nervous systems, we really appreciate you for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. It's like, thank you for giving me a place to talk about it. It's like, that's what helps it fly and get out there. So I appreciate you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.